One of the most common arguments you'll hear in defense of gender ideology is that some people are intersex, and therefore the gender binary is a myth. Now, that's what we're told. It's a non sequitur, as I've explained many times, and it's usually accompanied by a series of additional lies. You'll often hear wildly inflated numbers from gender activists about how many intersex people there are in the world. You also hear various definitions for what it means to be intersex. Those definitions are often tailored to that so that they can inflate the number of people who qualify as intersex. But here's the only definition that has any meaning, as Leonard Sachs framed it. Being intersex means that your phenotypic sex, meaning your primary sex characteristics, is inconsistent with your chromosomal sex. For example, someone with Y chromosomes is biologically male and normally has male genitalia. But if that person develops female genitalia or genitalia that appear female, then that person will be a biological male who suffers from intersexuality. Now, on the other hand, if someone is born with Y chromosomes and then chooses to remove his male genitalia through surgery, that individual would not suddenly become intersex. There's no comparison whatsoever between being intersex and identifying as transgender. These are two different things. Being intersex is a condition. It's a medical condition. It's not a choice. And it's a condition that a vanishingly small percentage of the population suffers from, something like 0.018% of the population. And this is all just basic biology, or at least that's what it used to be considered. But because people still take gender activists seriously, at least some people do, there's a lot of confusion in this area. And at the Olympics the other day, that confusion led to a male, somebody with XY chromosomes, pummeling a woman in the face at a women's boxing event on live television. This male, an Algerian named Iman Khalif, was reportedly DNA tested at the Women's World Boxing Championships in New Delhi last year by an organization called IBA. And officials at the time disqualified Khalif from the competition because testing confirmed a Y chromosome, which means, again, that Khalif is a male. There are reports of some sort of a disorder affecting the primary sex characteristics. I can't verify those. Either way, the fact remains that whatever condition this person may or may not suffer from, whether it's an intersex condition or something else, Khalif is a male by definition. Intersex is just a word we've come up with to describe people who suffer from certain conditions and deformities. Intersex is not a third sex. It's not an exception to the rule of the sex binary. There are no exceptions. Okay, everybody is either male or female. Everyone. A male that we call intersex may, because of his condition, appear female, potentially, but he's still a male. However, the International Olympic Committee, which is overseeing the boxing competition at the Paris Olympics, apparently doesn't care about chromosomes. According to the Washington Post, the IOC does not test for gender. Now, it's not really clear what that means. I mean, does that mean that they let LeBron James compete in the women's basketball tournament? What it appears to mean, based on reporting that I found, is that the IOC allows different events to implement some testosterone guidelines. Not rules, but just guidelines, which can vary event by event. And if that's the case, it obviously would be completely useless for a few reasons. One of them is that even if you have low levels of testosterone now, you might have had very high levels in the past, which would contribute to increased muscle strength, bone growth, etc. The other reason is that having high levels of testosterone doesn't make you a man in and of itself. Having a Y chromosome makes you a man. And a man with low testosterone, even a man with very low testosterone, is just a man with very low testosterone. That's still not a woman. But sporting competitions, like the rest of society, many of them have caved to gender activists on this point. And that's why the Algerian male's fight with Italy's female boxer, Angela Carini, ended in just 46 seconds. Watch.
Solid, straight right hand from...
Now, one of the things about all these gender tests and DNA tests is that, really, for the most part, they're not even necessary. Like, looking at that footage, anyone can instantly tell that Angela Carini was fighting a male. We said at the top that there are intersex conditions where someone is a male biologically, but because of things that have gone wrong may appear female from the outside. That can happen in very vanishingly rare cases. But this isn't even one of those cases. I mean, you can look and you can see the absurdity of the situation. Her opponent is obviously much stronger than she is. This is obviously an unfair fight. There aren't any females on the planet who look like this boxer from Algeria. And of course, it took just one hit to the face for Angela Carini to figure out that she was in danger after working her whole life to get to the Olympics and competing in them, something that obviously meant a lot to her based on her interviews after the fact and based on the fact that it's the Olympics. She had to quit because the IOC put a male in the boxing ring with her. And she didn't want to quit, but reality quite literally hit her in the face, so she had no choice. Now, trans activists have claimed that the fact that this male boxer apparently isn't trans, that's the claim anyway. Again, I don't know for sure. The fact that Khalif is allegedly intersex, that somehow proves their point about the women's sports issue. But of course it does the opposite, because those of us on the side of common sense have always said that segregating sports based on sex has nothing to do with transgenderism. We are not trying to keep males out of women's sports because we're engaged in some kind of discriminatory plot against trans people. We don't care if the male competing against women is trans or not. His self-identification is totally irrelevant. That is our point. It's what we've been saying the whole time. Trans, intersex, or something else, it doesn't matter. Okay, if somebody is male, if they have a Y chromosome, they should not compete against women. When you ban males from women's sports, you are not banning trans-identified people from women's sports. This is not a trans ban, as it's so often called. No, you can write these laws and these policies and never make any mention of trans, because it's beside the point. You are banning males, no matter how they identify or what genetic condition they may or may not have. All that matters is that they're male. That's it. For these purposes, all that matters is that they're male. But if you think that violent episodes like this are going to make the trans activists admit that they're wrong, and so wrong that now actual women are being endangered, and this, of course, actual women have been endangered by this for a long time now, you should know that there's precisely zero chance of that. They're not going to admit anything. These people have assumed such a degree of power that even their victims don't want to criticize them for fear of losing their livelihoods, and that's true in this case as well. In a post-fight statement, Angela Carini stated, quote, "I felt a severe pain in my nose, and with the maturity of a boxer, I said enough because I didn't want to. I couldn't finish the match. I'm not here to judge or pass judgment. If an athlete is this way, and in that sense it's not right or it is right, it's not up to me to decide. I just did my job as a boxer. I got into the ring and fought. I did it with my head held high and with a broken heart for not having finished the last kilometer." Now, what's interesting about that statement is, how common this sort of thing is. She says, it's not up to me to decide whether a male can compete in a women's event. And that, that's true technically, but doesn't mean she can't have an opinion on it. And if enough female athletes started sharing their opinion and stopped participating in this charade, it would end very quickly. Now, of course, some brave female athletes have been quite vocal about this. Riley Gaines, for example, she's not the only one. But still, most, even now, remain silent for fear of the consequences of speaking out. And it's worth mentioning something else, too. Some of the women who are vocal opponents of gender ideology still feel the need to frame this conversation in the terms of left-wing victimology. So yesterday, in response to this story, the children's author J.K. Rowling wrote, quote, "Could any picture sum up our new men's rights movement better? The smirk of a male who knows he's protected by a misogynist sporting establishment, enjoying the distress of a woman he's just punched in the head and whose life ambition he's just shattered." Now, I agree with her on the points, right, about what the policies should be in place and the fact that men should be competing against women. So we agree on that fundamental point. But the problem with Rowling's attempt to blame this on the men's rights movement, whatever that is that, first of all, there is no men's rights movement, at least not one with any degree of power right now. Okay, it's like anyone who identifies themselves as a men's rights activist, these are people who have no power whatsoever in society. And there certainly isn't a men's rights movement that's pushing trans ideology. Okay, in fact, if you find anyone who would identify themselves as men's rights, you could pretty much guarantee that that is not someone who supports trans ideology. Instead, what we saw in Paris this week is a natural consequence, not of men's rights or the patriarchy. It's a natural consequence of the ideology that feminists have been pushing for decades. It was feminists who argued that sex differences are mostly social constructs that are exploited by patriarchal oppressors. Feminists are the ones who laid the groundwork for the idea that there's no job a man can do that a woman can't do better. Okay? They came up with that. Men and women are equal. They can do the same things. Gender is a social construct. That came from feminism. And once you believe that lie, then you get this. You get women in a boxing ring with men getting violently assaulted. And it's precisely because of feminists that this insanity will continue. By refusing to identify the problem and how we got here, they're making it impossible to solve it. J.K. Rowling has said a lot of things on this issue that I agree with. She's done a lot of good on this issue. But she can't help but pivot it every time back to patriarchy and, this is all a plot by men. Even though, by the way, it's mostly women, actually, who support gender ideology. And the polls will show you that every time, in this country especially. And so even the feminists who oppose it now, they are not willing to look at their own ideology, which is feminism, to see that that's where this stuff is grounded in. In fact, they share the same. If it didn't come from feminism, they're on the same tree. Okay, they share the same roots. Now, this Algerian male is scheduled to fight Hungary's first Olympic women's boxer, Anna Luca Hamori, on Saturday. And what's her reaction? Well, she said, quote, "I don't care about the press story and social media. If she or he is a man, it'll be a bigger victory for me if I win." Now, again, this is stock feminist rhetoric. Sounds great on posters. Sounds great, in the classroom, but when you're getting punched in the face, suddenly none of that rhetoric matters. All that matters is reality. And right now, a lot of people are choosing to ignore reality. They're choosing to ignore what we all just saw. Even after what happened at the fight on Thursday, BBC's boxing commentator Steve Bunce suggested that Carini wasn't actually hit all that severely. Listen.
BBC Radio 5 Live's boxing commentator Steve Bunce was there. And Steve, this seems extraordinary. Can you talk us through what happened?
I'd like to. I have no idea what happened. I was watching a fight for 46 seconds, a fight that people have been talking about and writing about and pontificating about for about 10 days. And 46 seconds after it started, it finished. There was a half a blow, then there was a right hand, and Angela Karina turned around, said something to her cornermen. They got up on the apron. Khalif stood in the middle of the ring. There was confusion, and then the referee waved it off. She'd quit after being hit with one solid right-hand punch.
Right, and there were some reports that Angela Carini's nose might have been broken. Can we substantiate that?
Well, I'm not a doctor, but I have been at ringside for nearly 40 years, and I've seen damaged, hurt, injured boxers. I've seen boxers, male and female, in tears on their knees, absolutely bamboozled. I've seen them up close, and I saw this fighter, Carini, up close. I was 5 feet from her 6 minutes after the fight. Her nose wasn't broken. Her nose wasn't bleeding.
She didn't have a mark on her, he says. Everyone's just pontificating. That's the BBC's boxing expert. And of course, these are not people who care about the safety of women. They're mocking women even after they take the worst hit of their lives to the face from an opponent who's clearly a male in a women's competition. And this appears to be the prevailing attitude. Right now, there are no indications that the IOC is going to take any additional steps to protect the women in these competitions. There's another male boxer, Lin Yu of Taiwan, who's set to go up against a woman at another event. And I think that happened today. We seem to be at the point that it's going to take, a woman to die in one of these events for the powers that be to wake up to the fact that concepts like sex and chromosomes are real. And in fact, if something as horrible as that did happen, it's quite possible at this point that the expert class will pretend to be shocked by it. Who could have seen this coming? It's a tragedy, they'll say. But the thing about reality is that it's not political. It asserts itself whether we like it or not. And based on what's happening right now in Paris, we appear to be rapidly approaching the moment when reality asserts itself with tragic consequences. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.